Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Shriman Narayana.
What we're going to be doing now is a little bit of shloka recitation and then commentary on, again, an important verse, a verse that I've commented on quite a few times in the past, but that I felt was appropriate for doing today. This is again from Bhagavad Gita, from chapter 4, verse 42. And as always, I'll just go over quickly just the individual words with you. So I won't be saying this in any sort of meter. Just want to go through the pronunciation of the words, because there are several that are quite long here. This verse proceeds, Tasmad Agyana Sambhutam Hritstam Gyana Sinatmanaha Chitvainam Sangyasham Yogam Atishto Tishta Bharata. So that's the pronunciation of the Sanskrita. And now we will recite it together in proper Anushtubh Shloka meter. Tasmad Agyana Sambhutam Hritstam Gyana Sinatmanaha Chitvainam Sangshayam Yogam Atishto Tishta Bharata Tasmad Agyana Sambhutam Hritstam Gyana Sinatmanaha Chitvainam Sangshayam Yogam Atishto Tishta Bharata Tasmad Agyana Sambhutam Hritstam Gyana Sinatmanaha Chitvainam Sangshayam Yogam Atishto Tishta Bharata. And the translation by Srila Prabhupada is, Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. So we've heard this verse before. I've commented on it before, several times actually, in fact more times than people are aware of, because I've been speaking and lecturing for almost 40 years now, and most of it was never caught on any sort of recording device. But this is a very important verse, and it's beautiful how Prabhupada translates this verse. Why is this verse of such great importance? Because it is one of the most inspirational verses that we'll find in the Vedic scriptures. Certainly in the Bhagavad Gita, it's one of the most inspirational verses that we find. And before we dive into the verse, let's back up a little bit and try to understand why it's so inspirational. As we know, what is the story of Bhagavad Gita? The story of Bhagavad Gita is astounding. I've given hour-long lectures. In fact, I did one at the University of Illinois in Chicago many years ago, in the 90s actually, where for 1 hour I didn't even comment on Bhagavad Gita. I just explained the background of Bhagavad Gita and why it's of such importance. But without giving that hour-long lecture, let me just say that one of the most important things is what is represented very specifically by Arjuna. When you understand the significance of the Bhagavad Gita as literature, and then you understand also that coupled with the existential crisis that Arjuna is having at that time when the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, then you have an even greater appreciation for this work, for Bhagavad Gita. Because what is the story? Well, Arjuna, of course, as we know, as I've repeated many times, but needs to be repeated again and again and again, he represents us. This is why this is the scripture for the Kali Yuga. He represents us. And what do we see with Arjuna? Oh, if you read the entire Mahabharata, then you get a very good idea of who Arjuna is. He is a warrior par excellence. He is someone who does not know fear. He is someone who does not know doubt. He is someone whose every moment of his life is steered by Dharma. What can be said? His best friend is Krishna. His best friend is God. So this is a man who is strong. It's interesting. Strong, strength. I'm in the midst of finishing writing this book, Be Strong. So I've been contemplating strength for weeks and weeks now as I'm finishing writing this book. Well, here we have an individual who, what to speak of trying to become strong, which so many of us indeed need to endeavor to do, and strong in so many ways. Physically, oh yes, for some of us. Morally, for all of us. Intellectually, emotionally, mentally, but certainly spiritually. In so many ways, so many of us strive to be strong, and we struggle with that all of our lives. We do exercises to become strong, etc. Well, here was someone who was strong. He didn't have to try to be strong. He was strong. He achieved that. And yet, despite that fact, what is shown in Bhagavad Gita is the nature of finitude. The nature of finitude, the fact of our being finite beings. And that being the case, as strong as we may make ourselves, we still can show weakness sometimes. And more, we still can sometimes fall apart. And that's what happened to Arjuna. And this juxtaposition of, on the one hand, a man who is so strong, on the one hand, but then on the other hand, even he, falling into depression, falling into hopelessness, falling into what today we would call a type of nihilism, etc., just wanting to give up and go disappear somewhere. What an amazing thing to show, even as far as literature. But this is not just literature. This actually happened. And, of course, what then happens throughout the course of 18 chapters, 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita, is we see this man rebuilt, like building a building, brick by brick. We see this man who had given up on life, rebuilt. And how? Rebuilt by Krishna, rebuilt by, who was his guru? Krishna. This person who was his guru, and the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And when we go through the Bhagavad Gita, we see all the quote-unquote arguments. They're not arguments, they're absolute truth. But for the sake of literature, the arguments that Krishna gives to Arjuna from varying different perspectives, but all of it, of course, being steeped in the foundational reality of the spiritual, and trying to explain to Arjuna that, oh yes, you think you're wise, you think you understand, but you are not seeing from God's perspective, from the greatest perspective. And once you do that, of course, you realize that, oh, you are not to have any doubts whatsoever. You are to rise, you are to fight, and you are to fight for me, completely detached and with devotion. And toward the end of Bhagavad Gita, oh, Arjuna rises. Arjuna rises, and he fights. And he fights with greater strength than he ever had before that conversation took place. So with that as just the background, let's go through this verse, and we'll go through it actually somewhat quickly. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart. All right, we'll stop there. We'll stop there. Because what it means to be human is to have doubts. What it means to be human is to have doubts. And doubts in a variety of things. Doubt in ourselves. See, what do we doubt? What can we doubt? Well, we often doubt ourselves. What does that mean? That means that if and only if you are truly a good person, that means that you have wonderful qualities within you. You see, we understand that people in the world are not all the same. We understand that some people are, to one extreme, demonic, horrible, horrible, evil people. We want to stay far away from such individuals. We don't really even try to help them if they're psychopaths, if they truly are just inherently bad. We just stay away from them and say a prayer for them. And then we have the vast majority of individuals who are just kind of in between. They can be mixed, a little good, a little bad. But then you have those individuals who are positively good, and that includes so many followers of the ISDS. That includes the vast, 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 vast majority of people who are involved in the ISDS. You are good individuals. You are truly good in so many different ways. But what is interesting is, despite that fact of being good, sometimes we can lose sight of that. We can lose sight of our good qualities, that we are intelligent, that we are that we're funny, that we're witty, that we are loving, that we are compassionate, and that we work hard, and on and on and on. So many things that are there within us, but sometimes we have doubts in even ourselves, and we forget the fact that we have all of these positive qualities that are there. And what happens, of course? Well, the exact same thing that happened to Arjuna. When you have self-doubt especially, you become paralyzed. When you have self-doubt, and it's the saddest thing of all, actually. I'm dealing with this first because it's the most debilitating. When you have self-doubt, what does this mean? If you have self-doubt, yet you're a good person. It means that you have everything within you to accomplish great things, wonderful things, to create beauty in this world, to bring love and God and truth and so many important things to the lives of others. But because you have that self-doubt, you feel paralyzed. Then, of course, what else do we have doubts in? Name it. Oh, we can have doubts in it. People can have doubts in God, whether God even exists. People can have doubts about the path of Sanatana Dharma. People can have doubts about, again, so many things. We don't have to list them all. Well, here Krishna is addressing the doubts that are there within the heart of, quite literally, Arjuna. But of course, he's speaking to all of us. We are to rid ourselves of all of these debilitating doubts. We must not doubt, we must believe, we must have faith. Faith in the good, not just blind faith, not just faith in anything, but faith in that which, in our heart of hearts, we truly know to be true. If you're a good person, and yet you've convinced yourself that you're not, that's not true. Convince yourself of the truth, that you are good. Know that. Never have doubts again. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart. So this is what Krishna is addressing when he speaks to Arjuna. And how do these doubts come? Out of ignorance. Out of ignorance. So this is the explanation. Why do we doubt? Because we don't have knowledge. Because we don't have knowledge. Oh, what? Oh, this guy just showed up to fix my car? Well, I don't know. My car has like 5 different problems, and I don't know. How can this guy fix my car? You don't have the knowledge to understand that the person is a master mechanic. You just don't know. You just don't know. So this is where the doubts come from, out of ignorance. And what is ignorance? I've discussed this before. It's just lack of knowledge. Ignorance is simply the opposite of knowledge. There's jnana and there's agyana. Indeed, if you look at the Sanskrit here, that's the word that's used, is agyana. Agyana means ignorance, the opposite of jnana, the opposite of actual knowledge. So when we have ignorance of X topic, including even ourselves, when we don't fully know and embrace who and what we are, when we don't fully know and embrace what is the nature of God, what is the nature of this path known as Sanatana Dharma, when we are dealing out of ignorance, to say it the way Prabhupada would, ignorance, then what happens? We have doubts. Now, the negative being established, now Krishna says the positive, and that is these doubts should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. How beautiful. I've said this before when I've commented on this verse before, that I love this part. I love this part because knowledge is compared by Krishna to actually a very sharp sword. And that's precisely what it is. And why is this the case? Because knowledge comes about by using all of the cognitive tools of knowledge. What does that mean? That means that we have the ability to discern more than anything. And what does it mean to discern? It means that we have the ability to separate that which is true, that which is not true. And in every single instance, every single micro instance, we have the ability to separate. This is not true. I put it aside. This is true. I incorporate it into my being. And we do this again and again and again. So it's actually a perfect way of describing this when Krishna says this, that knowledge is like a weapon. It's like a sword. And when we slash into that reality, of course, not with an actual sword, but with knowledge, then we have the ability to eliminate our own ignorance and to know that which is versus that which is not. And this is the greatest struggle. People can be even on the spiritual path, but if they don't have the ability to separate that which is from that which is not, that which is reality versus that which is actually an illusion, but we're as convinced of its reality as anything, well, then of course we're in trouble if we don't have the ability to do this. So this is what we are to do. We are to acquire knowledge. And now Krishna continues. So he's continuing, of course, with this theme of knowledge as a weapon. And now he says, armed with yoga, oh Bharata. Bharata, of course, is one of the appellations, one of the names of Arjuna. But armed with yoga, how interesting. And again, I've said this in the past because it truly does amaze me when Krishna says this specifically. Armed with what? With yoga. And what is meant by this? Why is Krishna saying this to Arjuna specifically? Well, first of all, because for the preceding chapters, that is almost 4 chapters, because this chapter is almost done, really 4 chapters previous to this and the chapters that are to come, what does Krishna speak to Arjuna about again and again and again? There are several themes of Bhagavad Gita. Even exploring all of these varying themes actually is fascinating. But one of them is yoga. Yoga. If you read through Bhagavad Gita, and especially if you look at the Sanskrit, because very often the word yoga will be translated into English in a different way, a different word. Sometimes Prabhupada translates it as mysticism, for example, or various words like this. The word is yoga. Krishna speaks about yoga again and again and again. Now, why is he telling Arjuna, this Kshatriya, about this? Well, because this is our path to liberation. This has always been the path to liberation, to the point where it is justifiable to actually say, not in the sectarian sense, but in the methodological sense, that yoga is the only path to liberation. Yoga meaning what? The systematic unfoldment of who and what we truly are within as Atman, as soul, and that then followed by realization of God, realization of that which is the soul of our soul, and doing so in a way that is systematic, i.e. sadhana. That's what yoga is. So indeed, again, when Krishna says this to Arjuna, is he speaking only to Arjuna? No, of course not. He's speaking to all of us in the Kali Yuga, i.e. we are to practice yoga. Of course, yoga in what sense? Does it mean asanas? Actually, yes, that too. Does it mean only asanas? No, absolutely not. Of course, now when we hear yoga, we think about asanas. And yet, if you see how Krishna uses the word yoga from beginning to end throughout the Bhagavad Gita, how he uses this word, he's not talking merely about asanas. Indeed, he only really mentions asanas in the 6th chapter. Yoga is that which brings about union, communion between ourselves and the Absolute. That is the path that we follow. Yoga is Sanatana Dharma in practical application. Sanatana Dharma is our path. Yoga is how we practice it. So thus, armed with yoga, O Bharata. Now, I've said this before, but it's important. Why does he address Arjuna as Bharata? You see, I've actually heard this from atheistic scholars, some of who I actually studied with. But they'll say, oh, yes, when you see Krishna calling Arjuna all these various names, or Arjuna calling Krishna all these various names. It's so that the writer, and of course in their mind the writer is some nobody. It's not Krishna, it's not Vyasa. They'll say, oh, it's just so that the writer can have a good rhythm in the Sanskrit. And no, that's not the case. Every time that you see that Krishna is calling Arjuna by a specific name, Kaunteya, Bharata, or Arjuna itself, and then vice versa as well, that Arjuna will call Krishna by different names. If you look at the context, there is a reason why Krishna is calling Arjuna one name versus another. In this case, indeed, he does not address him, oh Arjuna. He says, oh Bharata. Now, why does he call him this? The reason why he calls him this is because Bharata, Maharaja Bharata, was one of the greatest kings in Vedic times, to the point where Prabhupada has stated this, that our entire Earth planet is actually named after him, Bharata. Now, of course, the Vedic world has shrunk to the point where it's pretty much located in India. It's centralized in India. And even to this day, what is the really Hindi word for India? Does anyone here in the office know? What do Indians actually call India?
Bharatvarsh.
Yes, Bharat. In the Hindi, Bharat. So just like Bharata, but with the last A left off. So that is how great this king was, Maharaja Bharata. So why does he address Arjuna by this name? Well, obviously, Arjuna being in the Surya Vangsha, very few people today know anything really about the Surya Vangsha. But not only was Arjuna a part of the Surya Vangsha, so was Bharata. And he addresses him in this way to remind him of who he is. O Arjuna, you are a descendant of Bharata, after whom, in honor of him, our very planet is named. So he's reminding him of who he is. And then, finally, stand and fight. Stand and fight. I will talk about this for a minute because these three words are crucial. They are of great importance. Otherwise, Krishna would not say them. Of course, when we're talking about the very specific context of Bhagavad Gita, of course, he's speaking quite literally to Arjuna. Arjuna is sitting, interestingly, because the story is that indeed he drops his bow and arrow and he sits down on his chariot in his depression. So he is quite literally sitting. So, of course, Krishna is telling him, stand up. Stand up. Oh, you, hey, oh, Bharata, hey, you understand, you are a descendant of this great king. What are you doing? Stand up and then do your duty. Fight. In other words, manifest who you truly are. You are a warrior. That's putting it lightly. You are royalty. Even that's putting it lightly. You are a king of this earth, and a righteous one. So he's telling him, fight. So of course he's saying this specifically to Arjuna. But again, as I said before, the Bhagavad Gita is meant for us as well, not just Arjuna. It is our scripture, and Krishna speaking to the men and the women of the Kali Yuga. So what is he saying to us? Well, again, how did we start this? It's not just Arjuna who was depressed. It's not just Arjuna who lost hope. It was not just Arjuna who began to have doubts and doubts and doubts arising out of ignorance. But this also includes so many people today as well. And of course, I've spoken about this almost endlessly because it needs to be, because this is the phenomenon of our age. Our age meaning, especially just the last decade or two, the last several decades. Everyone is experiencing, indeed, this internal state of sadness and turmoil for so many reasons that we can go into, but we don't have to. And that even includes, people in the ISDS. I've spoken to so many people one-on-one, where in addition to speaking philosophically, people today very often just need their hope rekindled. So indeed, when we hear the stand and fight, this is meant for us. And it doesn't matter if we're not in the Surya Vangsha, if we're not royalty, if we're not Kshatriyas, warriors, it doesn't matter. Whoever we are, wherever we find ourselves, what Krishna is saying is this. He's speaking to you directly. To Arjuna, yes, but also to you. And he's telling you, where do you find yourself? Where have you found yourself? Do you find yourself feeling down? Do you find yourself looking around and just feeling hopeless because of so many crazy things happening in your life, not just in the world, things happening with your family, challenges that are there, traumas that you've experienced early in your life that just truly debilitated you, and now you're accustomed to just thinking in a black-pilled sort of way because, oh yes, you haven't maybe had so much luck in life, and as a result, you're just convinced that, well, this is, I guess, what life is meant to be. Well, whatever your circumstance, you also are to stand and fight. What does this mean? You know, it's interesting. Again, I've contemplated this so much for over the last 52 years. It's been amazing, these three words, stand and fight. And how it is indeed sequential, and Krishna said this on purpose. First, we have to stand. We have to find ourselves. We have to center ourselves. We need to find our center. We need to stand up and find the foundation of the earth under us. We need to prepare ourselves. And then, that being the case, now that we are strong, standing upon our two own feet, now we have to do whatever it is that we need to do in this world. And again, for very few people does this mean, oh, you grab your bow and arrow and you literally enter into a battle. No. Whatever it is that you need to face, you have a job that you need to do, and oh, it's not the best job in the world, you have a boss who you can't stand, etc. Okay, maybe it's temporary. Hopefully you'll find a better job in the future, but for now, this is where you are. Stand and fight. Stand up, be strong, do what you need to do. Do your duty. Why is Krishna telling Arjuna to stand and fight? Because it's his duty to fight. Well, it's our duty also to stand and do the right thing. We fight in whatever way that means for us. Again, very few people today, some are, but a minority of people are warriors. That's all right. They have to stand and fight too. But whatever you are, you're going to write a book, stand and fight. You're going to go, yes, to your job, stand and fight. You're a student. You have to go to your classes, and maybe you're taking a class that's required and you don't really like it so much. Stand and fight. In other words, make yourself strong and then do what you need to do, understanding that it is Krishna himself telling you to do this. Understanding that you're not alone. You're never alone. You're never alone. God is always with us. You see, again, how our lives parallel Arjuna's more than we understand. Arjuna is there on the battlefield, initially depressed, and yet God. Not kind of God, not an idea of God. Literally God is there with him as his charioteer. And yet he loses sight of this. Don't you lose sight of the fact that you're not alone. God is with you. God is always with you. And that being the case, understanding this, there is nothing good in this world that you cannot accomplish. There is nothing that is good in this world that you cannot do. So, rid yourself of doubts. Doubts in yourself, doubts in God, doubts in Sanatana Dharma, doubts in truth. Rid yourself of this. Stand up. Be strong. Understanding that as you're standing, even if your knees are shaking, Krishna is there holding you up. It's not only your strength, but Krishna also is there. You may not see him, but he's actually holding you up as you're standing. And then do the good in this world that you need to do for yourself and others. Fight. 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 So, thank you for listening to my commentary on this truly, truly wondrous verse. Let me just end by saying this. For those of you who you have indeed struggled with doubts, with hopelessness, with sadness, anything like this, and you have found it difficult to inspire yourself, take this verse. If you have a printer, if you don't just write it by hand, do some beautiful calligraphy, but put this verse on a nice piece of paper, hang it up somewhere where you can see it each day and contemplate what Krishna is saying here. So again, thank you all very much, everyone, for being here with me, for spending this time with me. And as always, I ask you, please, to continue doing wonderful things, all the wonderful things that you're doing. Continue doing good in this world in whatever way you can, big or small. Each day, just try to do good. Try to bring happiness to other people's lives in any way that you can. All right, well, everyone, please take very good care of yourselves in every way. And everyone, namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jai Sriman Narayana.
Take very good care, everyone.